Elisha, you bought your first business in 2022 and then did two more deals quite quickly after that in 2023 and 2025. Tell me about that first deal that you did. What did you buy and how did you buy it? How did you structure the deal?
Yeah, cool. And thanks for having me on, Dimitri. Yeah, my first deal, High Tech Aerials. It was a long time manufacturer in the communications industry. Found it through the broker channel, and moved on it pretty quickly. Um, got first to line up the meeting with the vendor, and kind of went from there. It was it was pretty funny. I dragged along my friend who was my de facto deal accountant at the time, and we'd just been doing some landscaping on my section and run over time through my poor planning. So we turn up and we're like sweaty and there's like blood running down his arm because we had a bit of a fall, and so like real casual, and that actually went down really well. Where we appeared down to earth, and that kind of landed well for like a practical owner, and yeah, so built on the relationship from there, just kept asking questions and setting up meetings to like understand more and more. The level of information in terms of reports and system outputs and things was limited, so we had to keep asking questions and getting to explain and try to dig out what data there was. But yeah, the negotiation was reasonably straightforward. They seemed to like us and what we were trying to do, and and so they quickly were like, yeah, we want to do a deal with you. For us, the finance was the tricky bit, trying to get enough funds together. We were trying to use just internal equity, so I had to get a bit of debt into the deal. So the major banks wouldn't take it because there wasn't high enough assets. So we landed on Kiwibank, which is a mid-sized bank, and they were happy to do a cash flow lend because the business was a lot more profitable than there was assets, which was unusual for a manufacturing company actually, from what I saw looking at others. So yeah,
So
there was a couple of
just talk me through the business and its numbers before we get into the funding structure. What EBITDA was it doing? What was the multiple? And then what was the purchase price of the business and revenue as well?
yeah. Revenue was about 1.6, 1.7 million. They had quite a good year the year before, but I would say it was more of an anomaly. So we were kind of looking, it's probably 1.7 million sales, just 600,000 or 700,000 EBITDA, depending on the on a few project work, which drives up sales on the odd year. But yeah, the purchase price was 2.3 million. We offered a fraction over what they came to market asking, and and basically asked them in response them to leave some money in a vendor finance note. So yeah, it was about a 3.5 times multiple on earnings. So yeah.
Awesome. And then how did you go about structuring? What did the kind of capital stack look like? You mentioned there's some vendor finance that you put some of your own cash into the deal that you put together, and then bank debt.
Yeah,
Talk me
so
through
me
the
and my
breakdown
business
of each
partner
of those.
came in for 30%, and then we had to get debt for the rest. So we found a bank that would do it, and had the vendor finance. So roughly split 50/50, that 70% between the vendor finance and the senior bank. The vendor finance, we had a repayment schedule over 2.5 years, and over that period it was 0% interest. It was kind of a bit of the give and take. We were more on the purchase price than what they're asking. We got 0% interest in the 2.5 year repayment period, and so then there was lumps structured every six months, sequentially getting larger. So we pushed out the repayments a wee bit towards the end, towards the 2.5 year mark, rather than the closer one. And yeah, the bank came to the party with the other part on a 4 year sort of amortization of the loan, sort of pay down schedule.
So I would assume that in that case, 35% debt, 35% vendor finance, and with the 30% equity, those combined repayments between the vendor finance and the debt, were they covered by the cash flows of the business?
Yeah, there were. Like it was, yeah, we modeled that out a lot. It was, yeah, that the bank was quite interested that was going to be possible, and when we were structuring the vendor finance side, that's partly why the repayments got larger later on. But it did pay for itself. I just didn't pay myself for the first couple of years, so a lot of the cash went into servicing. Obviously, yeah,
Okay. Yeah, that comment that you made about offering over asking price in order to get the vendor finance is super interesting. How much did you have to offer over them? I mean, what was you said you paid 2.3. What was the asking price? And I would think that, obviously you went down the path of vendor finance. Did you consider having the seller just retain some equity, like roll in equity into the new entity?
Mm.
Any considerations
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, the asking was 2.2. So it was 100K
Okay.
essentially over. They did, like, it was competitive. They did have other other offers and other cash offers. So I think someone else had matched our offer, but just with cash. So we're probably quite fortunate to get it, to be honest. And it was all down to that relationship side, how they really wanted it to sell to us by the time we got to know them, and they just sort of narrowed in, and we got it exclusive from there. But yeah, I did consider, well, like, later deals, we came back and we're like, oh, maybe don't offer them more, but just, add interest kind of thing. Is probably
Yeah,
structure I'd look at these days. Rolling equity, none of them seem. I haven't had much success with that, or earn out kind of structures even. It seems to be a bit of a bad flavor in the mouth for most of the sellers. I'm not particularly sure why, but yeah, the one of the things with trying to fund it internally was to have, it's a small business, which we wanted to maintain control, and not overcomplicate it in terms of the capital structure. So we're like, let's do it ourselves, rather handle, more debt than shareholders that might, poke their nose in, and want to, be involved in decisions and things. So that was definitely a
absolutely.
factor.
Okay.
But that seller was very, very good to us, and popped in every now and again, and you ring him and ask a question, he'd pick up the phone and give you his views. Yeah.
Awesome. So you then went on to buy two other businesses, but before we get into that, give me a bit of background on how you ended up buying the first one in terms of, I mean, who is Elisha and why did you end up going down the path of buying businesses?
Yeah. Well, professionally, I had a degree in economics and finance, started in corporate finance at PwC, and then moved into management consulting there, and then later at Grant Thornton. So, yeah, like, essentially a professional services background. End up writing a lot of reports and telling people, hey, you should do this with your business, or you've got this problem, maybe try this. Sometimes presentations, but a lot of reports. And I got quite frustrated with the fact you'd go back the next year and they'd bring you back and, oh, yep, what do you think this year, kind of thing. And they wouldn't have done anything. And it was one client. It was particularly embarrassing that in the very first meeting, kickoff of the second year of a project, it was like, oh, we haven't done any of the actions from last year. I don't know why you're here. Oh, okay, right. So I mean, you probably shouldn't have paid us to come back, but that's all right. We'll make something up and put in a report. So yeah, there's this kind of this growing frustration of, like, you can kind of think something up that's a really good plan, and but it really does come down to execution, and so I wanted to get right into that, and sort of take my own advice kind of thing with my own business. So, and then a sort of growing understanding that entrepreneurship is more than just, making a startup. The startup land wasn't ever going to be for me. I kind of knew the odds of success were not in my favor, and being a kind of a data guy, I'm like, yeah, I know that too much, and so that's not for me. But and I was like, entrepreneurship through acquisition, actually, the success rates are quite good. You don't need to have you don't need to have an idea per se. Like, you just find a good business, and the values in the transition. So I was like, that really does sound like me. So those two things came together, and I was like, that's it. I'm going to do it. I'm gonna pivot from the professional services cushy job in the office, and get stuck into to a real practical business. And yeah, so after being in professional services for about 10 years, I started looking, and looked just through the broker channel, really, and wherever I could get my hands on. Very nearly bought a small childcare center that, that needed some. It was a bit underperforming, and, like, I got through that deal diligence. Like, the final stage was landlord signing over the lease, and he wouldn't do it. Which, a few calls with the lawyer, and my lawyer's like, "He has no right not to do this, but do you want a landlord like this?" And it's like, and do you want the legal fees of forcing him? Ooh, yeah, okay. Maybe I'll just let this one go. So yeah, then after that, that went went to the gone. I got back into the market, and pretty soon after that, found high tech aerials. So it was a blessing in disguise that I lost a small fish, which was definitely not as good as high tech is, and found a great business that then was able to move on pretty quickly.
And then with high tech, you went in, you bought the business. I mean, we broke down the deal structure, but day one, what did that look like? And how did that compare with your expectations coming in from corporate and having kind of criticized and giving feedback on other people's businesses and then them not coming back and doing it? And sort of you had some expectations set. So how did it compare actually running a business compared to being an advisory?
Yeah, it was quite different. It turns out it's a lot of little things that you don't, yeah, just need to get done. Paperwork needs to be signed, and like utilities need to be set up, and insurance, and just a whole bunch of little stuff that, yeah, lands on your desk as the owner. And and doing it was an asset sale, so we had a new entity as well. So everything needs to be changed over: suppliers, customer account, all utilities. So initially, first week there's a lot of paperwork, re-signing docs, and then kind of landing with yes, small business land. It's like there's 100 little decisions to make. Most of them aren't strategic, like, but they just got to get done, and someone's got to make a call, and okay, let's just do it. And getting through, then trying to work out what's actually important in amongst all the small things. So fortunately, I had a couple of managers. We promoted a couple of people to run the day to day, and they did a good job. They were first time managers, so they were learning as I was really. But they were very keen to be on the journey and to get stuck in. So it was a young team. They were about my age as well, and I initially went in after the initial transition. I was like, oh, maybe I could just do 1 day a week. That didn't last very long. But I kept my day job at Grant Thornton, and then so it was 4 days a week and one in the office, and yeah, it didn't last very long. So I quit my day job, and I was like, oh, I'll contract back to you. I'll just be a contractor, and they kind of needed me, so but it made it a lot more flexible. I moved into the office full time, and just jumped on all the meetings, did the emails from there. So yeah, could pay myself through the contracting, but be available and quick to respond for anything for the business. Yeah.
But I'd imagine with 600 to 700K EBITDA in that business, the first business that you bought, high tech aerials, there should have been enough padding in there to kind of pay you a salary for your time, or was that not the case after all the debt servicing and commitments that
Essentially
you
for the
had?
debt servicing and some of the investment we wanted to do, like it was a trade-off really. It was like, well, if I don't have to pay myself, then we can pay the debt down faster, and it would consider that lower risk. So made it work with sort of 3 hours a day of contracting. I could, had enough to live on, and then we're just like aggressively paying down that debt, buying the odd thing here and there to modernize the place because there was a few things that needed to be done. The so there wasn't a lot of cash left over. Yeah.
So what were the big levers that you kind of pulled, and have you increased the revenue since you bought it? But operationally, what were the big things that you did in order to sort of achieve that and to get some growth, to squeeze some juice out of the lemon?
Yeah, well, the first year was all about foundations. It had been probably run on not much change in 10 years, and they'd been a bit maybe sleepwalking, you could say, and particularly some of the quality aspects had. There were probably some controls that were never there, but it definitely got worse in the period leading up to us taking over. We quickly found that out, and it was a manufacturing business that's largely by hand, and so without proper systems and things, you basically get different people building something slightly different, and between days you get the same person building something slightly different, what should be the same. So the engineering manager really newly promoted one, really had his work cut up from that first year. So some of the things we did there was there was a number of there was paper flying around everywhere, basically. Like it was run on paper. The business was run on paper. There was no operating system, and the designs, which are obviously very important if you're trying to build something, there'd be multiple versions, and everyone would have their own side notes about what to actually do to build this product. And so get in there and someone picks up what they think's the latest design and maybe what notes they have, and they build the wrong thing, or it just doesn't perform particularly well. And so, yeah, the engineering manager was quick to point this out, and he's like, okay, well, we need to standardize what is the design, find the latest, update it, what are the notes that need to be incorporated into that, and then an actual build instruction, not just a diagram showing dimensions. So he took that next step there. In terms of QA process, he actually installed a test of every aerial as it gets built towards the end. And so you know that everyone performs as it should. And that had been done sporadically. We then stepped that up later on and actually printed it out and put the test sheet in with the product, and the customers loved that. It was like, it's the proof that we were putting in the work to make sure that the quality was there. And then, yeah, a number of things, underperforming suppliers, which I helped tackle, and probably a trade-off. There wasn't an appropriate trade-off between internal time and paying someone else to do something for you. The previous owner didn't particularly value or cost like time. He thought it was a fixed cost that is free, essentially. And particularly when it's his time, he didn't value the fact that if you did a manual thing for 2 hours, that actually does cost you. And so there's a number of parts that actually they were trying to do internally, like bending a steel rod, trying to bend this by hand, and actually it needs to be a certain size and actually fit into some other parts. So then when you got to trying to put it together with these other parts, there'd be a lot of rework, and some parts wouldn't fit together with others. It'd be a lot of waste of time. So we looked at which parts actually should be outsourced, and every part's got a built 3D models of every part. And a lot of the suppliers had been, well, again, it sort of comes down to documentation. There'd been poor documentation that had gone out to suppliers on what to build, including lack of tolerance for each of the dimensions, because some of them are very, very particular. If two pieces have to fit together, then there's not a lot of tolerance between them. So we put that on all the drawings and provided 3D models for any of the parts that were outsourced. So it was kind of not particularly sexy stuff in the first year, but all foundation things that we did pretty quickly hear from customers that they appreciated the step up in quality and what we were doing. Like, it was a number of small things that became noticeable to the customer base, and that over time we did win customers back with that. And some customers had been kind of playing us with a competitor, when you can't get it from them, or get it from them. But some had almost given up, like, because of the quality issues. So managed to win some of those back over time. And yeah, nothing really in the first year dramatic in terms of sales or marketing. It was just about getting the foundations, and okay, if we put ourselves out there, like, we can actually deliver to our customers what we say we're going to deliver. The second year, sort of following on from that, we wanted to put in a manufacturing system. But again, like, we needed to know what we were building. We needed to know what was going in there. So there's a lot of work on understanding and building up the bill of materials, which wasn't ever known for each of the products. And then we could step into, okay, now how do we stand up a system that then can track inventory, and we know what we have on the shelf, what we can make with the parts that we've got, and we don't end up order coming in and we've got to wait 4 weeks for a part to turn up before we can even get to that order, which was a semi-regular occurrence. One small part would hold up an order. So again,
But Elisha, you're not an engineer, and you're getting quite into the technicalities of sort of the manufacturing process in this business. How did you figure all of that out? I mean, there's clearly a lot of sort of systematic or operational improvements that you made. Did you have an idea of these improvements you were going to make before you bought the business, or you went and kind of winged it as you promoted? I mean, it sounds like you promoted some key people, and was it a matter of leaning heavily on them, or how did you as a non-engineer go about actually running a manufacturing business and figuring all this stuff out that you share?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I was probably a bit more capable than an equivalent, your typical professional services person. Like, I wasn't just straight out of the accounting team. I did consult in the operations space and supply chain and procurement, and a bit around sort of quality. So, and then I read a lot. I'm like, wow, what does good look like? Always reading, always learning. But obviously, yeah, I work closely with the staff and supported. Yeah, I'm like, bring me ideas. Okay, what are we doing? What's the problem? What are you spending your time? Like, where are we not at specification, and what's the biggest problems? And then we just go down the list. So it was really, yeah, I was very supportive of any quality improvements the engineering manager brought to me. Is like, if we did this, yeah, or anytime an issue came up, I'm like, well, what's the real issue here? Customers complaining, it's not doing what it said it should. Let's walk that back a couple of steps. So it's really just problem solving. I don't know. The actual execution of the thing probably wasn't me, but just being, yeah, real supportive of and actually trying to get to root causes and solve the root causes. So yeah, I did a bit of a background for it, but yeah, you got to learn quick if you want to own a small business. Yeah.
And you bought, I think that the key to all of this and the subsequent acquisitions that we'll get into in a second is that you built almost a pseudo, like a management team right away through a series of promotions when you first stepped into the business. Who did you promote, and what did that make your day-to-day look like, as opposed to, I'd imagine the previous owner was running around doing all of this stuff himself. How did that change within the business once you promoted these people?
Yeah. Like I never set out to buy myself a day job. So, and obviously I probably wouldn't be the best person for that either. We did set out from the start. We're like, we're gonna try and get a business that can have a management team, and that then enabling at some point a subsequent acquisition, because we wouldn't be, completely dragged into the day to day. So yeah, the first acquisition, High Tech Aerials, there was two staff that the owner had kind of been training up and had kind of shoulder tapped to be managers. And I think the broker that ended up selling the business had worked with the owner, and I think done quite a good job at saying, hey, you really need to have some capable people here, and start to groom them to take over, because the next buyer probably isn't you. It probably doesn't have your technical knowledge. It probably just isn't, that person doesn't exist, and buyer, the one that's going to pay you the money, probably doesn't want to run it anyway. And it was bang on. 'Cause I know the other offer came from a financial buyer as well. So yeah, we were able to promote those two. So that one was an office manager, one was engineering, and they ran the day to day. I went in more in the first year and sort of slowly phased back out. Obviously, by the second year, I was focused on the second deal, but essentially got to know the business, understand where we need to improve, slowly step back, but ultimately a director role, managing director initially, and then just stepping back further into just the director role. So part of one of our structure that we implement is a sort of 3-tier reporting structure. So we have weekly metrics that we get the team to produce, just a few key numbers. And then we have a monthly reporting pack. So that's from the managers to the directors, essentially. And that includes most things relevant, potentially includes any decisions need to be made. And then quarterly, we look at projects. What do we want to do? Particularly one-off things, improvement initiatives. What are we focusing on this quarter? And trying to get at least one or two things done in the quarter, going to the improvement of the business. So yeah, that's the kind of the general structure. We run them. It's kind of like a very similar to Traction. If you've read that, we learned a lot from that.
Yeah, and then because a lot of people listening to this will be wondering, like, how can I buy and run multiple businesses, or buy a business and then sort of step away after the first year? Is that a reality? Because kind of the contrary thought to that is that, you're buying a business of this size, at least you're buying a job, and you have to be in there every day. And it's kind of a pipe dream to be able to step away and work on a second or a third acquisition. What does your day-to-day look like? Or once you had implemented these systems, what was the final or the polished product looking like in terms of who is reporting to you, and how much are you dealing with this specific business on a day-to-day basis? What challenges are you dealing with? Is it just putting out fires, or does it go beyond that? How much are you strategizing? What do things look like once you've finished the management implementation?
Yeah, so like right now as we stand, the first two businesses, the management team's in place. They run the day to day. I'm involved probably half an hour a week, so it's very light. And my big issues, staffing, potentially big suppliers or customer issues, but that's rare actually. And then just the sort of the growth or strategic side is where I try to spend the time. So we do occasionally bigger dives into that, the quarterly meetings, or checking in on progress and supporting some of those improvement projects. So I sometimes get reasonably involved in the improvement project side, particularly if it's sort of my skill set. But day to day, I'm really not involved.
Okay. So who's dealing with the customers on a day-to-day basis? Because I know that's quite from the customer's perspective, they always prefer to deal with the owner, and it's kind of difficult to sometimes delegate that specific part, the customer satisfaction and sales as well. How have you guys gone about approaching that, keeping customers happy and then impressing new prospective customers without it being the owner that's having those conversations?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like often these businesses, the owner's wearing a lot of hats, so they tend to be a bit older. They they can do a lot of variety. Like they tend to be technical in the area that they're in. So operations being a skill, but they don't always have a lot of like they may not be particularly strong in sales or even customer service. One of the businesses, which I won't name, that the customer service wasn't strong. It wasn't the strength of the owner. So partly when we look at the management team, we do typically go for a team. We go for two, and that's partly to get the different skill sets needed, and actually in some areas be stronger than the previous owner, because it's just one person and they may be strong at building stuff or thinking up new designs, but maybe not strong on the sales or HR or customer service side. So from the get go, I make sure that the managers are dealing with customers. Like I get in, do customer visits and shake some hands and things, try to understand what they want, but quickly try and hand off. Okay, yep, so and so will support, and try to get back out. I think I found customers just appreciate like better customer service, and so it doesn't always come down. It doesn't tend to come down to title. It's like they know the person that's friendly, that wants to help, and will sort out their issues if there is some. So at our second business, the manager we put in there, that was an area that we wanted to improve, and partly through the personality and skills of the one of the managers we put in, like we were able to step that area up pretty quick and had some really positive feedback, and won back a couple of customers where there'd been some tension and words were said. We're able to go back to those customers and say, hey, we're here, we'd still love to do business. And so yeah, there usually is some areas where the previous owner wearing all the hats isn't as strong, and it's potential to improve those.
And then you very quickly moved on to a second acquisition. I mean, first one 22, second one 2023. That's fast. I would imagine the management team had a big part of that. But anyway, let's get into the second deal. Industrial painters, also a very different business from manufacturing to a service-based, commercial services.
Yeah.
Break down that deal for me and what the business does.
Yeah. So yeah, acquired not much long after, a little over a year after the first one. I'd call it a little bit opportunistic. It came up and it was a supplier, like a service provider for high tech, and so we knew them. We knew what they could do. The purchase price was 660,000, so it was a wee bit smaller, about 2.5 times EBITDA. And yeah, I mean, it does mostly powder coating, actually, a bit of wet spray paint. But yeah, a 60-year-old business had already been through a couple of, so we became the third owner, which again we quite liked, that it had transitioned successfully before. And yeah, it was offered to us with some vendor finance and at a pretty competitive price when they sort of heard that we were interested in acquisitions, and they weren't able to sell it the first time around. So obviously being only a year in from the other deal and using up our internal equity there, we had to get a little bit creative on structure there. So we had the vendor finance that they came to the table with. That was 150,000. Banks said they'd come to the party with a wee bit, but we needed to get to 30% equity. So we brought in a couple of minor shareholders that were family to get the equity portion, the 200,000 there. And yeah, that business actually grew like in the period that we were sort of negotiating that final year in the previous ownership, and our first year it actually grew quite quickly. And so like on like a trailing multiple was closer to like 2 times. So that was the cash flow has always been quite good with that one. Much more room in the debt repayment schedule for that. But yeah, the main thing was to find a manager because the owner was running it, and we asked around our network and found someone that we thought would be good to run it, and so he stepped in from day one, and basically the transition was from the vendor to the new manager. I came in every day, but largely the transition was to the new manager, and he took on the customer relationships and things from day one as well. Well, he'd been we hired him a wee bit early, and he'd been sort of shadowing the previous owner for a month or so before. So yeah, it was. I think that year before we took over, it was about 1 million sales in our first year at 1.15, and has gone up to 1.4 million sales at 20% EBITDA margins now. But yeah, it's a wee bit smaller. Our same banking relationship came to the party for 300,000.
Okay, awesome. And the manager that you dropped into that business, what was that like in terms of getting him up to speed? Was the business able to support a salary for him? Because it was that's quite a small, generally when people are going for businesses where they do want to drop in a manager, they're looking for 500K to 1 million plus EBITDA. Did that put a big strain, or how did that kind of work practically?
Yeah, it was doable. There had been a salary there for the previous owner, so like that was in the forecast from day one. We probably pay him a little over market for a business of that size, but it can more than comfortably pay that salary. But again, I didn't put a salary for myself in there because I wasn't the manager. So yeah, that was in the model from day one. But yeah, it is smaller and it's starting to get to the size of like having it under management is going to be tougher. But yeah, we still expect to that the 20% EBITDA margin with the manager salary in there.
Okay. And then you brought some friends and family equity into that deal. How did you structure that? And were they just buying into that specific opco, or were they buying into the holding company, or what did that all look like in the terms for those investors as well?
Yeah, so we had the holding company that had one entity that was the operating 100% ownership at that point. So that's Talanton Holding Company, High-Tech Aerials, and this was a new entity, new operating entity with another asset sale. So the minor shareholders bought into the new operating entity, and like in terms of like the technical structure there, it's like a shareholder advance. So we'll pay them back, and they have the equity slice as well, just a bit for tax purposes.
Okay, amazing. And then on to deal 3, Signals NZ. Tell me about what that looked like.
Yeah, so we had almost a couple of years off, and then
Yeah.
got wind of this one. I looked again through the broker channel. I keep an eye on it to see what comes through, and it was in the industry of IT aerials, right? It was a customer, so at least familiar a little bit. But interestingly, they primarily bought the competitor's product, which we saw as an opportunity. Anyway, the first look at the deal, I actually passed on it. I said, oh, maybe too soon. May not be able to get the funds together. And it was listed for 3.75 million, and so they marketed that. I thought it was probably marketed a bit poorly, and eventually they came back to me a few months later and said, hey, we're going to drop the price, and would you have another look? And so I was like, oh yeah, go on. So they dropped the price to 3 mil, and I said, you know what, let's have a decent look at it. So the main thing to solve for that one was the family in the business. It was essentially a family business, husband and wife pair. On the org chart, it was CEO, CFO, operations manager was the daughter, And so you're looking at those three most senior roles, and you're like, how's this going to work for a business with a very, very low number of staff, like 6 total? So that was one of the red flags early on. But I went and had the meetings and worked out, okay, we transition the CFO thing quite easily, more of an accounts role. And I'm like, you know what, I could probably step in at this point. I had enough capacity at that point. I could step in as the general manager, so long as I could delegate a lot of the technical bit. But I still at this point am not that technical with my background. So yeah, we we did the deal. 3 million. It was very light in staff and assets. So there was a bit of work with the bank to get finance for it. But yeah, we had 10% equity to add into that and finance the rest mostly with senior debt, a little bit of a private debt note to top up for some inventory. And yeah, the earnings, it was about 3 times multiple, so there's about 1 million in earnings.
Okay.
And
Let's talk more about this whole family situation because I get a lot of IMs coming from brokers, and the first thing I do when I see that situation, I mean, it comes up all the time, is just like, I'm going to stay away from that. I'm too scared of it. Why did you guys not have the same reaction? I mean, especially if there's 6 staff in the business, the accounts role you were able to delegate. How did you actually go about? Did you hire an external manager again, or what? How did you solve this problem?
yeah, well, it turned me off on the first time. I was like, nah, I've been there. Like actually for the second business, we'd kind of been there and got burnt a little bit. It was a family member left in the business and it didn't go particularly well and I had to exit them eventually. And so this one I was like, yeah, red flag. But I had a look because it was in the industry. I was like, the earnings were quite strong. So I just had to understand each of those roles and what that might look like under our ownership. So yeah, we got our head around the CFO role, like it's an accounts role. We could, or my business partner's an accountant, he can fill some of that, or we can. I think in our model we hired an accounts role, a new role. The operations manager being the daughter, we just wrote into the contract. We need to see and approve them, and that they will sign a new contract. Otherwise, the deal's off. So we had a meeting with them like pretty early on. Like none of the other staff knew the business was for sale, and and it turned out she was awesome. And she was like, the first meeting, she was
Okay.
like, oh, we need some young blood around here. Like, yo, dad's been, not wanting to change things for a while. I think it'd be good you guys getting in here. Like, yeah, I'm keen to get involved. Yeah, stay involved. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I like you. You can stay. Yeah, if that had that meeting not gone well, like the deal would be off. Like, it was as simple as that. The the main, owner, sort of general manager, I kind of split his role into, it really should be 3. There was partly a sales role, which I've picked up temporarily, but looking to actively hiring for that now, and partly general manager. So I've taken on that role for, well, at least for a year. We'll see how we go after that. And then there's a technical role. And the technical role, we've been able to delegate within the team, made a hire pretty early on to help capacity in that regard. But it was, yeah, essentially slicing up that role into different functions and really getting our head around what does it actually do? Can we transition this? And probably if we first saw this business and not being in the industry, it would probably have been a no. We probably couldn't have done it. But being in the industry, like we're like, kind of know what this business does. And I've actually got some more technical people in my other business that, potentially chip in. So I could get my head around it. But yeah, definitely it was front of mind, and we did a lot of work on that and the diligence and a lot of questions. And the whole structure was a bit trickier with 3 entities and some creative accounting that had been in place previously. So that made the diligence a lot trickier, a bit more prolonged for this one.
And then you did mention that you have a business partner, but we haven't talked about him at all. What was, or what is his involvement throughout this entire holdco building journey?
Yeah, so he's involved at the whole co level. He's a CA accountant training and had some very senior roles in that sphere. So, but he's kept a day job throughout. So he's evenings and weekends. He's our CFO for the group, and I've, yeah, largely sort of managing director, and when there's needed to be one, stepping in and getting into the detail. And yeah, he's obviously helped a lot around setting up the reporting and finance functions, getting the training any accounts roles and managers and what they need to do, and and zero accounting and other areas like that. So yeah, he's put a few late night shifts, that's for sure. But yeah, he'll probably transition in to the holdco shortly. Probably got enough for him to do. Uh, yeah.
Fantastic. It sounds like you guys are crushing it. I mean, this is every acquirer's or hardcore builder's dream, is 3 acquisitions in quick succession with 3 businesses that are relatively doing okay running themselves, concurrently, or you managing multiple businesses at one time without things falling apart. But have you had any massive oh shit moments throughout the journey?
Like, it's been an interesting period. Like, I haven't known anything else, right? So like, you started, we were like, I think there might have been a COVID lockdown, like soon after buying, or like we were in diligence while there was one. So like there was COVID, some very high shipping rates, there's a bit of importing involved, like container shipping rates got crazy there for a bit. Been the Ukraine war and some issues, supply chain things around that. There's obviously more recently the war, like, and it's just been all of these things. It's just been like a whole bunch of stuff, and then you just work through it. I don't know, like I almost haven't known like a normal period, like because yeah, it's just business. I think, or maybe there'll be one year nothing will happen, and that year we'll be like, oh, this is quite
Let's
leisurely.
let's
What's
buy
going on?
more. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, as soon as
What
we
what is Yeah, what does your lifestyle look like at the moment? I mean, are you pulling sort of 70, 80 hour long work weeks, or is it reasonable and under control? How did it compare to corporate life?
it's reasonable. Yeah, I just make sure I'm not too much like I want to understand the business in detail, but not be in the running them day to day. Like it's a very fine balance. Like you can be a director and not understand the business. Like I think it's actually really common that directors of large companies don't really understand the economics of the business. So you need to get in and understand that. Uh, but you can't get sucked in too much, otherwise you'll never do the second deal, or you'll be doing 80-hour weeks. So by the time I get to the next deal, like I have to like hand it off most things. And I think when when I was looking for signals, so the third one, I had the 2 businesses. I was actually working less than I almost ever had. Like I was doing a bit of contracting from home, and just the businesses ran themselves. Like I legitimately was working like 30 hours a week. And so then I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? Oh, I'll look for small businesses. Maybe I need something more to do, you know? So yeah, but you've got to design that, and you be quite conscious that you're working towards something. If you're getting in, you're getting in for a short period, or like if you're diving in to bring your expertise, like ideally that's in a project form, it's a one-off thing, and you can hand that off, or once it's done, it's done, and you're not needed after that. Well, one of the things that we did quite intentionally with high tech was there was that major system implementation. And like one of my areas that I'd done consulting in was system selection and to some degree implementation. Like, so I had some expertise there, but actually we lent more on the managers to run that process, to find the one they want, guide them with a bit of structure, but actually them to drive that. And at the end, they own it. That's not, Elisha's system, and Elisha's system's bloody not working again. You get the potential for that outcome, or that they don't understand as well as I do. They actually understand it better than I do. It is their system. They've built it, and they run it. So that change, like it it did take a little bit longer because it's all new, but at the end of it, they own it, like, and it's theirs, and like they're like, yeah, this works. So yeah, like, do I do big weeks? No, surprisingly, no. Sometimes have put in a bit of a shift to get a deal done. Obviously, it's 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 a lump. Doing any deal is a is a lump of effort, and actually, if you don't already have your capacity for that, you just won't do another deal. If you're for business one, you're in the day to day, you're already doing 40 hours, you won't have capacity to do another deal. You've got to get, down to being 20 hours or less in order to have the flex capacity to just get a deal across the line. And sometimes with deals you got to move fast, or there's just a body of things to get through. So yeah, it's I don't know. I get home to the family at night.
Amazing. Amazing. And so this holdco now, give me some headline or some summary numbers. You at the moment you are doing how much in revenue and how much in EBITDA?
Yeah, we'll do EBITDA of over 2 mil this year and a pretty good margins. So, and that's including my salary now as part of that, and a wee bit my business partner as well. So we've been able to bake that into the third. So yeah, there's to about four mil rev. Yeah,
2 million in EBITDA, but how much EBITDA did you buy? If I add that up, you've got deal one was 650, deal two was 300, that's 950, and then deal three, what was the EBITDA of Signals and
about 900.
900,
But that was
1.8. So
growing.
so, okay, so it's grown a little bit. Fantastic. And that's from nothing in 2 years, which is amazing. All right, Elisha, thank you so much for coming. Where can people find you if they want to have a chat with you?
Yeah, probably on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest. And yeah, Elisha Nuttall is there's not many of those on LinkedIn. You'll be able to find me. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Dimitri.